very good morning to you. If you are just tuning into Y254 channel, you're watching Y in the Morning, the hottest breakfast show around. But hata nikisema ni hot, I'd still be lying because we're also late. So it's the hottest and the latest breakfast show in this here town. We run from 7 till 10. It's a daily affair. That means Monday all the way through Friday. But Leo needs to be a queens. And we have a strength of a woman. But we'll just call her the queen of the day because she has come to enlighten us all. I feel so blessed to be in her presence. I'm not even lying. My name is Valentine. As at Y254 on Facebook, Y254 channel on Twitter. Hashtag is Y in the Morning or WCW. Now allow me to allow her to introduce herself before we get started. Good morning.
Good morning.
You look fabulous first.
Thank you.
Karibu sana. Please do tell the audience who you are.
Hi, my name is Jessica Olwech. I am an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, but I do work with the Kenya Legal and Ethical Issues Network on HIV and AIDS, and I'm a program officer for Women Learner Property Rights.
Is there any way we can find you if we needed to?
Yes, we do. We do have a website, www.kellinkenya.org. We do have a Twitter handle at Kellin Kenya, and we're also on Facebook, Kellin, K-E-L-I-N.
Okay, so let's just get off straight. Let's get off running. Why are we here today? What are we talking about?
Today we're talking about widows, specifically the human rights of widows. So Kellin as an organization works on health-related human rights, and for the Women's Property Rights Program, we focus on the most vulnerable women. So yesterday was the International Day for Widows, and therefore we'd like today to be able to highlight the kind of rights that these widows have, and the kind of violations that they face, and the kind of laws that we have that protect these women from these violations.
So that the feminists who are watching or probably will watch later on so that they don't come for us, does being a widow make you vulnerable or is there more to it?
I think a lot of things make women vulnerable. Being a woman on its own makes you vulnerable. But if you look at the layer of issues that might come on top of it, it makes you more vulnerable than you are as a woman. So for example, if you are a woman with disability, it makes you more vulnerable. And then you become a woman with disability who's affected or infected with HIV, it makes you more vulnerable. And then if you are a woman, and then you're a woman with disability, affected or infected with HIV, and you're a widow, you are even most vulnerable to the kind of violations that you must face at the community level. And specifically, the focus for us will be the property rights of women, because that allows them to be able to have autonomy, to be able to take care of themselves, and to be able to take care of their children.
I'm not too sure how things go across the cultures that we have in Kenya, because we have plenty. We have a couple of dominant ones, but we have a variety of cultures. But just generally, I have seen or I have heard of people or women who have just been I want to say robbed, because why are you taking something that's not yours, all in the name of, oh, maybe your late husband didn't leave a will, so now you're the mgeni hapa, so wacha nichukue vitu zangu. Kama unataka kukaa na watoto kaa nao, kuna wenye watachukua hadi watoto. So maybe help us understand that. What kind of instances have you experienced in this line of work?
So as Kellin, we do work with widows, specifically in the western parts of Kenya, in Kisumu and Homa Bay counties. And I think for us, what we have seen is how culture impacts on the rights of women, and specifically their rights to property and the rights, for example, to be able to have human dignity. So a good example for me would be for widows whose husband dies. So especially among the Luo community, you'll find that once the husband dies, then there comes in questions relating to property. So the issue there is that the law that we have in Kenya, the Constitution, it recognizes that culture should actually be valued, and it is a good thing. But the same Constitution recognizes that if there is a culture that derogates or rather limits the rights of a specific group of people, then that culture should not be applied. So in us applying every culture that we have, in order for it to be a culture that can be applied and is a culture that is respecting human rights, then we have to ensure that one party is not affected negatively while the other party, let's say, is thriving. So for example, among the Luo community, we have practices that we do culturally. For example, the practice of widow inheritance. So if you talk to the Council of Elders, who are supposed to be the custodians of culture, they will explain to you that the culture of widow inheritance was supposed to protect the women. So after the death of the husband, they found it necessary for the woman to be able to have a man figure for purposes of protection. And it was symbolic in that way. So it will be like somebody comes and hangs a coat and says, okay, I am protective of you in this way. But then with modernization and people coming in and people trying to twist culture, then still from the elders' perspective, we have gotten that people have decided to sexualize these practices. So it means that when it comes to widow inheritance, somebody puts in an aspect of having sex with the widow in order for that to symbolize the inheritance aspect. And this process is usually, among most communities, the aspect of cleansing of women. So it means that if you look at, for example, the HIV prevalence in Kisumu and Homa Bay, it's very high.
That was my next point.
It is very, very high. And most of these widows, you'll find that they're widows who are affected or infected with HIV. When they want to practice this kind of practices, they do not use protection. And this is one thing, it's both for the widow and for the other party, because it means there is that aspect of transmission, and evidence has shown that it's actually contributing to the kind of prevalence that we have in these areas. So the other issue, and we do have a lot of stories about women from these areas who refuse to be inherited, maybe because they know their status, or just the aspect of having autonomy as an individual. Because even in Kenya as it stands, you're supposed to be able to accept to be married. Marriage is about consent. You have to accept to be married by somebody. So if they refuse to go through this process, then the process of disinheritance happens. You find that either if they decide to stay in the home, the people in the community will feel a taboo is going to be flawless. If you remain here, you refuse to go through the widow cleansing, and it's an excuse that is used. If you remain here, then things are going to happen. So the best solution for you is to be able to leave. When these women leave, again, it is very difficult for you as a woman who was married to go back to your mother's home, and now that you're going to stay there. So what they do is they live in the market centers. If they were women, yes, they do live in the nearest market centers, because now they have to rent a house there. If you are a woman who was living at home, not paying rent, you have some garden there that you were digging. If you move to the market center and now you have to provide for your children, be able to pay school fees, it becomes a lot of a challenge. And that one again exposes them to the aspect of sometimes engaging in risky behaviors in order for them to be able to provide for their children. So that again is problematic. And that again is now bringing in this aspect of HIV prevalence. So it's very important for us to be able to understand, especially with the International Widows' Day, what are the rights that these women have? Do they even have a right to dignity? Do they have a right of choice? Do they have freedom of choice? Can they be able to choose whether to be inherited or not? But what about their health rights?
Let me just be very honest with you. Before you came, for a long time, I was led to believe that it was an act of compassion. That when your husband dies, that, you know, the community is now taking you in, you belong to them and all these things. But there's a very thin line between, you know, compassion and force. There's a very, very thin line. Because even within the bounds of marriage, even if we got married, you know, consensually, and one day I don't want to have sex, and my answer is no, that will consider, it will be rape if you have sex with me. And I am your wife, by the way. I had the earphone in Anguka. It's getting late, guys. It's getting late. So consent is quite fragile. But what happens to them? What happens to a widower? Do they get the same? Is there someone who has to stay with the man because the wife has died? Do they have any rights? Is there any cleansing for them? Please walk us through that.
I would have to come from the perspective that the kind of customs and traditions, and even from your own perspective, you realize that the customs that we have are patriarchal in nature. They tend to apply differently to women than to men.
It is a man's world.
Because in the reality, in terms of statistics and data that we have, even in terms of cases of violations, you won't have men reporting that they feel their property has been taken away because the wife died. And mostly when the wife dies, people automatically assume that the husband is going to take over the property. But the same right is not accorded to the women. So for widows, whether you are the one who bought that parcel of land, and you know the widows, the way we could be loving, I could be having money. I give it to my husband. He buys a parcel of land. He will write it in his own name. But when he dies, his people might come and say, well, this was a land that was belonging to our son.
Wow.
And if it belongs to our son, then we would like to keep it within the family. So that is the problem. They think if they give you property and you are not considered a relative of this home, in quotes, your children are, of course, they would want to be able to keep the property within that family. But then people are not taking into consideration the fact that constitutionally both men and women have equal rights to property. And then when it comes to aspect of succession, there's usually a degree as to who has the highest interest when somebody dies. So when your spouse dies, automatically you're the one with the highest right in this property, and then your children, and then the grandparents, and it has a degree like that. But unfortunately, when the husband dies, then there's this aspect of, okay, property is supposed to be a man issue, right? So for you to be able to earn this property, then you must stay here, and you must be able to, which is understandable because people will want to stay there. But then as an individual, you have to have a right to choice, because in Kenya, as it's now, we only have 5 kinds of marriages, right? And even that is supposed to be the civil marriages, the religious marriages, Hindu marriages, Islam marriages, and then the traditional kind of marriage. And if this was even supposed to be put within that ambit of traditional marriages, there are elements to traditional marriage, the aspect of dowry being paid, the aspect that you're an adult, the aspect that there is consent between the two of you to willingly enter into this marriage, and that is, even nowadays, everyone has to have a certificate of marriage. So when you're inheriting this woman from a customary perspective, right, and you're supposed to be the new husband, what kind of marriage is she under, even in terms of protection and succession issues?
That's borderline slavery.
It could be a lot of things, because it could border human degrading treatment, because they don't allow you as an individual to make a choice for yourself when you're a full adult. So it means that if I'm married to your home, I understand that people say when you go to a community, you are a wife of the home, which is a good thing. But then even as a wife of the home, you have rights as a wife, because if you look at our laws, even in the Marriage Act, it says the parties to a marriage, the man and the woman, they have equal rights before the marriage, during the marriage, and after the marriage. So at what point am I, as a wife, losing my rights to be able to decide what happens within my marriage, whether it is upon separation, whether it's divorce, whether it's death?
Is there a possibility that maybe in the day and age that we are in, that, for example, maybe let's just keep it to the West, that the husband left a will and detailed, I want this to go to my wife and go to my children. Do you still become property as the wife?
I think in situations where we have wills, it's I would say that in the rural areas it's very rare, because again people have taboos about writing wills. Some people believe when they write wills, it means they're planning to die, right? There are communities that believe that, but not everyone. But if you leave a will, it makes it more of a good place to start, because first of all, usually when someone dies, in order for you to be able to take over the property, then you have to go through a process that is called succession. So it means if you die right now, and then I just come and take over your house, that is a criminal offense. It's intermeddling in the property of somebody who has died. And then, when somebody dies, then that becomes a state issue. So in order for me to be able to get access to your property, and in order for me to be able to change your property from your name to my name, because I'm alive, then that means that I have to go through the process of succession. When you go to succession, succession is done in court, usually at the family division court. So when you go to do succession, they will ask you, first of all, did the person leave a will? If the person left a will, then that will has to be followed. But of course, not blindly, to an extent that it also respects the rights that we have in the Constitution and other legislations. But if the person dies without a will, then it means the law is supposed to take into consideration the laws that we have. So when somebody dies, the law that takes over is the law of succession that is supposed to determine, so who has a right to this property, and who is going to be the person who's going to manage the estate of the person who has died until that time when we get to change the titles to the people who are living. So maybe the person had children, the person has a wife, the person had parents that he was taking care of, the person had brothers, all that will be taken into consideration, but to a certain degree. Yes. So that's how it's supposed to happen. If you have a will, the better, because it outlines how the property is supposed to be divided, and the court is supposed to take that into consideration. If you don't have a will, still well and good. You will go to court, and then the court will look at the laws that we have, and will take that into consideration. But then the good thing nowadays is, even if you go to do succession in court, sometimes as a family, when you agree as a family and you go and you say, our person died, we would like to divide the property, and this is how we want to divide the property. The court will let you go and decide how you want to divide the property, and then you come back and register it with the court. As long as it is an aspect that is respecting equality, non-discrimination, and making sure that everyone is provided for. That is the easy way. But when you're having issues, wrangles, is when you have succession cases going for over 10 years and nobody is benefiting from the process.
And court is so expensive.
I know, like courts are expensive, especially for the people in the village. That's why we have informal justice system, where now the council of elders come in to be able to help us resolve such issues. So if, for example, you have issues within the family relating to wrangles, you can have this addressed by the council of elders, so that they can be able to help you come into an understanding, and then you proceed to do succession when, as a family, you've already agreed on how you want to divide this property. But then again, we have to be careful, because the elders that we have, they are the custodians of culture, and therefore there's need for them to be able to find that balance between the culture and the laws, and there's need for them to have that training and for the process to be recognized in order for the decisions also to be just and fair.
Someone tried to bring in the Bible while justifying what we are trying to figure out if it's where it's wrong. Why are you inheriting someone by force? But ni sawa. But because alisema stories of Bible, it reminded me of Ruth. And Ruth wanted to stay, manze. Ruth wanted to stay. And she told her mother-in-law, Nani asha pass, but where you will go, I will go. Your people will be my people. So I understand that compassion, and I understand that if someone has lost a husband and they really want to remain in that household, I get it, I get it. But ingine maze, okay, now because I want to stay, I must now sleep with Nani's brother, so that I don't hang outside. What kind of fair is that?
I feel also that people who are religious are pretty progressive. You find that they will not apply cultures that are discriminating against the widow, because again, this is a wife of the home. This is somebody who has your grandchildren, right? Your nieces, your nephew. For most people who are very religious and people who actually follow the Bible as it is, they do not get women to go through these practices, especially if you do understand that it is something that is inhibiting against the woman as an individual who has rights. So for most people who are religious, you find that the women stay in the home. They do not have to necessarily be inherited. And the whole process will be so religious. The husband will be buried. They will remain in the home. If there is property that is supposed to be done and succession is supposed to be done in court, they will go to court and do this process, and the woman continues living peacefully with the family. So it depends, but again, I say that culture is good. It is supposed to be preserved. It gives people a sense of identity.
Yes.
But then again, we have to really adhere to that aspect that if it is discriminative against a certain group, even the constitution says it can't be applied. It's the way we look at other cultural practices such as FGM. You know, that's how we look at it, and then we say, what is it doing for the person? Is the person's dignity still intact? Is it something that the person benefits from? Are they feeling discriminated in any kind of way? And as an individual, you have a right of choice. So at the end of the day, it comes to that. If you're being forced to go through a procedure that you do not want to go to, then that is a whole level of human rights violation.
Okay, again, I will just start on a light note and say, just recently, I have been exposed to certain foods. For example, unga ya kisiagi. And I was very upset. I was just so annoyed with the daughters of the West. Like, mmekubali aje nishine na waru all my life. Kumbe there are nutritious things that taste so good. You know? And for the longest time, I thought you guys just had it all good and you were just perfect and your life was fine. Then I find out, yeah, inheritance. And I thought, okay, maybe you kind of like it, but it turns out you kind of don't. And forgive me for saying this, but it kind of makes a little bit more sense. Why? Because again, I am ignorant and these stereotypes have been lost on me. So when I find someone very reluctant to be with someone from the West, mwanaume, you know, it doesn't ring in my mind, maybe she's afraid of being inherited. Do you think that has kind of fueled cultural, I want to say, I don't even know what to say. Because kuna venye sometimes hatupendani na sijui kwa nini.
I would say love is love. If you find somebody from the West that you like, I don't think that should be an issue, because at the end of the day, you don't have to go through the process. And at the end of the day, I didn't say it's everyone, it's only certain people. And you have to understand that sometimes the people who take you through this process, maybe they're doing it out of ignorance, maybe they're doing it because they saw somebody else do it, or maybe they're doing it, they usually do it because they want your property. It's not like they hate you or something. It's all about that parcel of land that you have. They want it. They know you're not going to accept this process. So and if you don't accept it, please make way. So that's the thing. Like, it's always, that's why when it comes to inheritance, for me, it's a property rights issue. Because if you are disinherited from the home, it means either your house is locked or you leave your house, right? If you leave your house, you're leaving your parcel of land. Because maybe it's still... And it's unfortunate that nowadays we have parcels of land that we even live with our spouses in, that are still in their grandfather's name, you understand? So, like, people have not taken that responsibility to be able to do succession and change these parcels of land to people who are alive. Because if it remains in the grandfather's name, then that is a whole family issue. Because when it comes to the grandfather, now the grandmother has the highest rights, and then now is when you divide between the sons and the daughter, and then your husband will get his portion as a son. If he's dead, you're supposed to get that as the wife. If you're dead, then the children get, right? But most people look at it as an opportunity to be able to take away your property rights. So sometimes it's not about you as an individual that they hate, but about the things that they have to benefit. And also about your vulnerability. It comes back to your vulnerability. Who do you have that is going to support you in this home? Like, if you are, for example, it's your brothers-in-law who are saying, this is what you have to go through. If you don't, then it's too bad, you have to leave. Who is it that you're going to be able to have that is supportive? In good situations, you have your mother-in-law who's supporting you, your father-in-law who's supporting you, but in very bad situations, and in the few cases that I have seen, because as Kellen, we have resolved over 600 cases relating to property rights disinheritance because of the aspect of customary laws. Good thing is people are becoming more sensitized nowadays, and that practice is diminishing. People are recognizing the law and things like that. But then there are people who are still using it to the letter to be able to disinherit you. Yeah, so it's not like every man from Western, if you marry them, this is what is going to... I hope I did not create that mentality in your head.
We have been afraid. It's just we didn't know how to say it, by the way. So just relax, guys. It's okay.
But you know, every community has a specific culture. When you're marrying into a community, I feel, just as due diligence, it's good to understand the kind of cultures that they have and the kind of perceptions that they do have. Because every community, for example, there's always that practice of woman-to-woman marriages in some communities. If you get into that community, then that is an option. And sometimes it's done for a good purpose. For example, if somebody is not able to bear children, then there's that aspect of communally people coming together and, you know, getting somebody to be able to bear children for you, or very old women. It depends on the situation. So there are communities that have cultures that give them a sense of identity, and it's supposed to be a good thing, as long as it does not discriminate on the rights of women.
So tuseme tu kuna kakitu tukalikuja tu hapa. It started very beautifully and it was meant for order and yes, you know, not anarchy. But suddenly mtu tu mali tu akaona, oh, if we can do it like this, that means according to my mathematic, ata mean as that's what happened.
Yeah, like if you speak to elders, for example, as an organization, you work with the Lower Council of Elders. If they explain to you the intent of the culture of widow inheritance, you'll be like, this is a good thing, right? But that's why sometimes when it comes to alternative dispute resolution, and especially traditional justice system, when the elders come in and sit with both parties, they're able to explain that, guys, this is how this culture is supposed to be practiced. Whatever you're doing is going even against our own culture. It's like you're trying to make it to suit your own purpose. So that's why it's very important to work with the elders, because as the custodians of culture, they do understand the intent of the culture. And if somebody is supposed to use it to derogate your rights, then these are the people who are going to help you to be able to access justice. Yes.
Okay, so let's get to the resolution. How have you been helping these people practically?
I think, as I mentioned, we have done a lot of mediation cases with the Council of Elders. So we partner with them to ensure that if you have women who are feeling that the property rights are being violated, then they go through the mediation process.
Forgive me, but isn't that itself kind of a taboo? That ati now sasa wewe mrembo venye uko, we ni msichana, we ni mdogo, sasa unaenda kuambia council of elders nini sasa? As a fact, I don't know if it's just African men, because it doesn't matter what part of Kenya you are, there's just a thing about African men and the respect they should be given. So how has that worked out for you?
I feel you'd be shocked.
Yeah?
Because sometimes, okay, mimi si msichana mdogo sana, I would say. I would have to say that.
Yeah.
But then, I agree with you, naweza kuwa nakaa mdogo. But then sometimes, I feel the kind of respect that you demand from people depend on you as an individual, right? Because the way we engage with the Council of Elders, we do not derogate whatever they do. We respect the kind of relationship they have at the community level, the respect that they have. And when we engage with the elders, we do not decide what they are going to decide. So what we do is, for example, we go to a community because the Council of Elders are already in those communities, right? And we have to understand from the cultural perspective what they think women's property rights looks like, right? But then there's the aspect of sensitization. Of course, we understand you, and this is what the culture says. It was not an easy process actually to be able to engage the Council of Elders, because it means training after training. So you'll find elders that are very progressive. Others might not be so progressive, but then again, it could be because of the lack of knowledge. Mm-hmm. Elders that we're working with have really embraced the law, because there's also that aspect of, even them from where they sit, they will want to be able to have decisions that promote the rights of both men and women, because equality comes into play, right? Mm-hmm. If whatever they're doing, because our constitution is not that it's pro-women, but it is pro-equality, right? So if we get elders and they do understand the customary point of view, for example, that widow inheritance is meant to protect the woman, not to have sexual relationships with her or to strip her of her property rights, right? And then we are able to take the elders through the training of what are the current laws when it comes to property rights. They understand the legal perspective of it. They do understand the documentation of cases aspect, and for them to be able to have formal agreements that can actually be respected, and after that those agreements can be able to support the women to be able to go through the succession process and other formal processes. Because even the judiciary as it is, it recognizes alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, right? So once the elders have been trained, then we do not even skew the kind of decisions that they have. The cases are usually identified and reported to the elders directly. The elders sit down on their own. They hear the side of both parties. They come up with their decision, which is taking into consideration both the culture and the law, and they document their decision. So that is we are doing more of a supportive role to the elders, sensitizing them, helping them in the documentation process, referring cases that are not referred to them directly. And in that way, you find that even them, they have come to embrace the aspect that for equality to be able to happen, for the community to be able to function, because at the end of the day, you must recognize that when women get access to property, there is economic growth. Mm-hmm. Women, when they get a parcel of land, they will farm that land. In reality, watu wanalima ni wanawake. They will go and farm that land, mm-hmm. and they will do it for the benefit of the entire family. They have children to take care of. It's not like they will just take property and do something useless with it. So when elders are able to do that, they document cases, they get to the communities, they sensitize the communities, and we have seen so much change, especially in the Western region, where now we have elders, the male champions, who are pushing for women's property rights.
Okay, maybe just before we wind this up, I want to... like imenipea feelings hadi niko na goosebumps, guys, but it's okay. We're going to talk about this because it's a Queen's Wednesday. I want to believe you, and I actually do believe you, and I'm glad that you did what you did. I'm glad that you sensitized, and I'm also very, very glad that there's a region full of people who are our basically ancestors, our elders, and can conform, you know, to something so good. But for a fact, I know kuna watu tu bado nafikiria an empowered woman, someone who's going to school, should be stopped. Hiyo ni kierere full. Kierere full. In fact, unafaa kuacha. In fact, I have heard some people talking about, no, we don't want to get married to this kind of girl because she talks too much. Tutabishana tu kwa nyumba. She will not be submissive. I'd rather get married to somebody mwenye ko reserve, mwenye jua kazi yake ni gani, nini wapi. Venye sisi hapa tunabishana manzi, hata I'm sure there are some words zinapita sana sana your jargon, my learned friend, na anakana na huyu haizi kuwa wife material. And I say that with confidence because just recently I heard of a story about FGM and manzi, tumeita ancestors hadi we got United Nations on board. This thing, we personally I've seen things, you know, but bado kuna watu wanafanya chini ya maji mazee. Parents circumcising their girl child without proper education, without proper procedures, na anamwacha tu hivyo apone juu hawezi mpeleka hosi juu utasema nini. And then you bring people at it's her birthday simply to cement that tumemtairi, now she's ready for the world. What would you like to tell that person maybe who's about to be inherited na hasaidiwi aki anaenda tu kuishi hiyo marketplace umeniambia? What would you like to tell her?
I think for me, what I would say first of all about practices such as widow inheritance, practices such as FGM, it's a social norm issue or a traditional issue. Sometimes we are not able to solve traditional issues by saying, this is what the law says. Sometimes it's very hard. So the best thing for us to do is to be able to start the bottom-up approach, to be able to engage communities, people at the community level, in terms of sensitization, because it's very good for us to be able to have change among ourselves as women, for example, and then you have change among men on the same issue, so that we are able to make changes from a community level so that they understand our point of view. Because if I come to you and tell you, no, you're not going to go through this because the law says 1, 2, 3, 4, sometimes it becomes hard. But when you have conversations with people, for example, and you explain to them that, you see, I've always found it so funny that when you're talking about men and wives or their, what do I say, their sisters-in-law, they will say, no, this thing must happen, this, right? And then you tell them, you know, you have a daughter.
Aha!
Now you tell them your daughter might go through the same process, then you see them being like, now that's a problem. You understand? Like sometimes you have to bring this thing close home, right? And explain to them that when we're talking about women, we're not talking about random women in the street. They're your sisters. If you'll be able to support this, if it happens to your sister, tell us about it. And you'll find that they'll draw back. So for us, it's very important for us to be able to have a change of social norms at the community level, and then sensitizing them on, for example, the importance of having women's rights recognized, the importance of making sure that, for example, even FGM has HIV perspective to it, as to how that is done. If you explain to them that these are the dangers of this, right? This is why we think that this should not be done, for them to be able to understand from your perspective, so that you can change the individuals at their own level, in order for you to be able to have change at a higher level. So first of all, he's explaining, but then at the end of the day, the law has to come into play, because if anything happens, even with regard to we have FGM cases in court, right? If anything should happen, then the only avenue that people have is access to justice, either formal or informal, right? So to anyone who feels that they do not have a right, for example, that woman who's feeling that right now I'm about to be inherited, there's nothing I can be able to do about it, there's hope, right? Because first of all, you have to identify that when it comes to human rights, they apply to everyone, men, women, children, we all have rights. And it is up to us to be able to recognize those rights and to be able to claim those rights. Because if you don't claim rights, you're not going to get access to justice. So it's just, the first step is to be able to speak out. Speak up, talk to somebody, tell somebody this is how I feel. Because for us, we do not, I would not say that from where I'm seated here, I'm getting cases from somewhere, for example, in Suba. How we do this is we have community health advocates and widow champions at that level. That if you have a case, then you're able to report it to this person. Then this person reports it, for example, to the elders resolve it. If it needs a legal perspective, we would come in. If it is something that they can resolve in their own perspective, they will resolve it. So for me, it is speak up. It's only in that way that you'll be able to know your rights and claim them, because everyone has rights. Yes.
Can we keep her, Manu? Anaweza kaka tu kwa set maze. She's full of content. I like it. But as it is, we gotta leave, we gotta go. So maybe if you could repeat how we can get you, the website, one more time.
Thank you so much. As I said earlier, I work for an organization called the Kenya Legal and Ethical Issues Network. We call ourselves KELIN. We are a human rights organization working on health-related human rights. We have a website, www.kelinkenya.org. You can find us on Twitter at KELIN Kenya. We are on Facebook at KELIN. We are also on Instagram you just search for Kelly. So we are almost everywhere. You can reach us in any way. And right now, especially with regard to the COVID situations, we are able to help in terms of a range of issues, because we not only work on property rights, but we work on sexual reproductive health rights, HIV and TB issues. Anyone who's feeling that their rights have been violated, speak to us, and then we're able to help you to be able to access justice.
That sounds to me like teenage pregnancies that are right up your alley.
It's right up our alley.
Wewe. Yeah, it's okay. It's all. Wacha nisijam sai. Thank you so very much for coming. And I want to just echo what she said. Apo kwa speak up. Boy child, I'm sorry that girl child has been empowered, and no one is giving you the opportunity or platform to catch up with girl child. I'm sorry. So hata we, if things are happening to you that umeambiwa mwanaume hafai kupitia, don't be afraid. Speak up, okay? We got you. At Y254 Facebook, at Y254 channel on Twitter. Hashtag is Y in the morning or WCW. My name is Valentine Usiendeaki. We still got more for you.